Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from today, and welcome to this Advanced Financial Management in Focus webinar to support the December 2025 exams. My name is Hazel McLucas and I work as an Education Partner Support Manager at ACCA. Our session today focuses on Make Your Marks, Quick Wins and Study Strategies. You'll learn how to achieve marks you can secure quickly with smart exam techniques and focused practice. Zikang Chan joins us today to deliver the session, and TK is a CA and FCCA and is also a member of ICAW. He comes with more than 20 years of teaching experience, specialising in PM, FM, APM and AFM exams. And currently he also leads the Professional Accountancy Centre of an Australia university based in Malaysia. You can always access some more information on TK in the detailed speaker's bio section on your page. During the session, TK will explore effective exam techniques, discover smart strategies and give advice on time management for the exam. He'll recommend what to include and how to focus your studies and practice during these last few weeks that are leading up to your exam day. And towards the end of the session, he'll also answer some live questions coming from you in the Q&A box. So before I hand things over, I'd like to briefly run through a few housekeeping items. At the bottom of your screen, there are a number of icons you can see. So please ensure that both the slides and the media player icon are selected because you'll need these throughout the webinar. You can also use the chat function to engage with fellow participants on the webinar, but I would say please avoid sharing any personal information in the chat. And also, if you look for the icon that resembles the file, clicking on this will give you access to helpful materials related to today's webinars, including some direct links. You can rearrange your screen to suit, so you can resize the windows if you need to. And if at any point you can't hear what's been said or see any of the visuals, then please refresh your browser. By registering for this webinar, you'll get an email tomorrow with all the details on how to watch it again. So don't worry if you miss anything or you run into technical issues, you'll be able to catch up with the recording later. I'm going to hand over to TK in a moment and I will be back with you towards the end of the session. But if you'd like to ask ACC a question, then please post them in the Q&A section on your screen. Just a quick note though, we might not be able to respond to everybody individually, whether through the chat or verbally, but we'll do our very best to share questions and answers that are helpful for everyone. So now I will pass over to TK.
Thank you, Hazel. Good day to all. Welcome to this AFM InFocus webinar. Now, Hazel has given a bit of my background introduction, and I would like to dive down into the first four aspects in this agenda. I will first share some of the exam technique, or I would rather say it is an exam habits, which allows you to dive down and get ready into the mode of exam soon as possible when the clock is start counting down during the exam session. Then, when the clock is start counting down, what exactly are the strategies that you start applying on the spot to start allowing you to have a good chance of scoping up easy mark, low-hanging fruits? And then, how are you overcoming the time constraints by having an effective and a sound time management habit? And of course, another piece of advice from me, it's from now until the exam day, what is the best thing? What are the value-added activity that you should be looking into to really putting the last push to your chances of getting through the examination? And of course, I would like to take on as many questions as I can in the Q&A box to solve your doubts, as many as I could with the time available. Well, without any further delay, let's get started off by sharing some of the exam technique for AFM. I would like to start giving some of the brief mindsets before showing you some of the exam technique and habit, which is about the advice regarding approaching the questions 1, 2, and 3 that appear in both the section of the exam paper. of all the exam technique and habit you are about to see from me in a moment, it's all building around the golden rule. Number one, easy mark comes first. So whatever we plan to do, any habits that we are going to share, it's all about allowing you to scope up easy mark soon as possible to the maximum extent. And of course, not to forget talking about the mindset of working around the clock based upon 3 hours and 50 minutes and 100 marks of the exam paper. Now you may see, instead of based upon 195 minutes in total, I'm using 3 hours for the planning purpose, which I will share with you the rationale in a moment. So it will be on the range of 1.5 to 1.8 minutes per mark in the exam questions that I will base upon when illustrating some of the exam technique and habit in a moment. Here are the steps that I think, whether it is dealing with questions 1, 2, or 3, these steps are all applicable. First and foremost, try to get yourself into the mode of exam instead of just putting yourself in a very tense and a stressful condition where the mind is blacked out for a few minutes, if it is not a few seconds. Whoever that is able to get yourself calmed down and get yourself into the mode of exam, you will definitely have the upper hand to have more rooms and time for you to reflect and apply what you would have learned prior to the exam. So one of the ways to calm your nerves down, apart from taking a deep breath, the other thing is that the moment you turn on to any questions in the exam practice platform during the exam day, it is trying to work on to copy and paste the entire requirement into the words response option. So the moment your hands and your behavior is getting into this kind of routine, you have no time to get tense and stressed out. So that will automatically fill up the blank in your mind. So this allows you to stay focused on doing the things that you're supposed to right at the beginning. Now, once you have done this part by copying the requirement into the words, I would suggest you don't just do it on the first questions that you attempt, do it for all the 3. After all the 3 questions are compulsory. So whatever it is, you just have to get all the requirement, put it into the word response option. So at least in your words response option, it is not starting with a blank piece of paper. Psychologically, don't you think so, guys? That is something that it tells to your mind, hey, I'm in the mode of producing, generating the answer. Get the ball rolling soon as possible. You will always be ahead of the time management. Now, if I were to pick up any one of the questions to attempt, whether it is questions 1 in section A or any of the section B questions, guys, do not underestimate the reading quality on the first exhibit. Many students may have thought first exhibit is just telling us some generic information like the background of the environment, the background of the company, but it is not something that's specifically relating to the requirement. Hence, it is nothing much for us to keep an eye. Guys, big mistakes. One of the way for you to scope up the easy mark, it is about getting yourself fully understand the background, environment, and the nature of the businesses so that you are able to scope up by generating points that relate to the scenario, put it into particularly the discursive nature of the requirement, which I will highlight a bit more detail in a moment. So the first exhibit is something that you never want to miss. Hence, I would therefore suggest put the first exhibit right into the word processor so that it will never get away from the eyesight. Now, the reason why I say put it in the word processor, put it as one part as your answer planning, it is to allow and ensure whenever you're dealing with any part of the requirement in the question, you can always scroll up to your word processor for ease of the references. Imagine if the exhibit 1 is hidden behind many of the other exhibits that you turn onto the screen. What do you think? The chances, the tendency that you tend to overlook or omit it, that will be much higher comparing to putting the first exhibit right in your word response option for the ease of reference. So that at all time in your desktop, you will have 2 windows. One side is for your response option to present the space in producing the answer. The other side is on the specific exhibit, particularly exhibit 2 and onwards, for you to pull out clue and figures that relate and reflect into your working and the calculation. If possible, try to stay focused by reading one time, a quality reading time on one exhibit at a time. It is very seldom that a requirement in the questions of AFM require the students to read the entire list of the content throughout all the exhibit to generate the idea. It is very, very seldom for AFM. At most, you just got to connect some specific clue in exhibit 2 and onwards together with some of the background information that found in exhibit 1 as mentioned a moment ago. That's all you have to do in producing ideas, generating points to produce particularly discursive nature of the requirements. So keep an eye on one exhibit at a time instead of going through all the exhibits by putting yourself spending too much of time in reading before turning into your time to produce some fruitful answers to start gaining marks. Well, once you start reading up the specific exhibit, particularly exhibit 2 and onwards, this is where you're supposed to look at the title of exhibit 2 and onwards, try matching with the requirements. You are likely to find a very clear evidence showing you which exactly is the exhibit that you need to refer when answering a particular requirement. When you see the matching and the connection, that is when you have to start reading the requirement in detail. From there, you will start creating your answer plan in your mind. In order to make up a full picture in your answer plan, you need to read up the exhibit for more detail, looking for inputs and data that you can feed the number into the calculation, feeding some specific clue to reflect into your discursive nature of answer. Joining the clue in the exhibit and forming the answer plan will only be done effectively if you bring in technical knowledge that is of relevance. So connecting technical knowledge and the clue in the scenario is a key for you to form a good and effective answer planning. Well, when you come to the point of getting ready to produce the answer for discursive requirement, these are some general advice and exam habits that you may want to consider reflecting into your daily habits when producing discursive requirements of answer. First and foremost, ensure you always articulate your answer in accordance with the verb in use. Now, this is not only ensuring the answer that you provide is of relevance to earn the technical marks. These were directly reflecting the amount of the professional skills marks that you could have earned. Any of the articulation style that is matching to the best extent to the verb will naturally maximizes the chances of earning technical and professional skills marks. And this is what I call the habit of scoping up easy marks. Well, guys, if you want to know what exactly is the right tone of writing the answer in response to the verb, there are plenty of learning resources, articles written by the examining team on AFM found in the ACCA resources or the website. Please spend some time, take a look at that, get yourself more prepared. Then, preparing to produce and present your written answer with headings, signposts. Don't forget, do not cram all the content of finding into one paragraph. It would be ideal if a paragraph of the content is only reflecting one key point. When you are to articulate another key point, don't forget to put it into another paragraph. So it makes it very clear-cut for the marking team to pick up how many key points are there in each of the paragraphs in your articulated answer. When you are dealing with numerical questions, in other words, the calculations questions, here are some of the tips on the exam technique. Always remember, when you put up the workings in the spreadsheet, it is not meant for you to see. It is meant for the marking team to try understand and reading your mind and judging your level of competency dealing with the technical calculation. So please remember, presenting the working in such a way that the marker will be able to follow your flow to identify your end result easily. More importantly, showing the marker the process of your working with clear indications of description if needs arise. So in other words, in bottom line, the way you present the numerical answer should always be of marker friendly. So this is the kind of the habit that you got to put yourself in the shoe of the marker at all time when you are presenting the answer on the spreadsheet.
Hi, TZ. Just, I don't want to interrupt you, but would you mind switching off your camera? There's just been a bit of buffering with the video image, and it may, we're getting some comments through the chat. Maybe if you switch your camera off, it might help with some connection issues.
Okay.
Thank you.
So just let me know, Hazel, if the interruptions still persist, yeah? Let's take a look at some of the exam questions, particularly the one that appear in the most recent ones, published in the practice platform, the March-June 25, the case study. Now, I have extracted the list of the requirements, which you can see. There are 6 items of the requirements right here. So as mentioned a moment ago, what I do as a first step is to pick up all the requirement and put it into my words response option in this manner. So with these to be applied throughout all the 3 questions, that will allow to start creating the basic framework of the answer in all the 3 questions right at the beginning. So this is exactly what I meant by step 1. In particular, when you are dealing with questions 1, the case study, as you may be aware, most of the case study in AFM would require the students to prepare and craft the answer in the form of report. So what does it mean to you? Hey guys, there are certain part of the professional skills marks, particularly communication, will be awarded to you if the answer is to present in the format of the report. So you may therefore see in my word processor, I would then, before even turning into my exhibit 1 or 2 to start reading, I would have started putting up the templates of the report where it is rather straightforward. Who are you writing to? What role that you are playing? The date of the report. If it is not given in the requirement, you may consider putting the exam date into that. And from the list of the requirement, you probably will be able to write down the title of the report as the reference. And let's not forget about the content layout of the report, starting with introduction, followed by the body. That's where all the requirements will come in. And finally, if you look at the bottom left of the screen, that will be the conclusion of the report. So these will allow you to lock in certain easy marks, particularly on the communication skills. Well, this is therefore the kind of the habit that you should take note and apply, particularly dealing with questions 1, putting up the template for the report. Then, if you look at the left-hand side of the screen by now, you would now see it is now looking at the first exhibit. As I mentioned a moment ago, the first exhibit always provides, even though it is generic, somehow most of these generic informations are pretty much crucial in generating specific, relevant answer, particularly dealing with discursive nature of the requirement. So guys, take a look at what I do. I'm putting this whole exhibit 1 into my words processor, but to indicate clearly, letting the marking team know this is not my answer. Do you see the title? Do not mark at the top. And then further down, do you see the answer at the back? So this is to communicate to the marking team so that the marking team will be able to follow your signposts to know where exactly to assess your answer for grading purpose. So by doing this, I do not need to worry that I have overlooked the clue and the informations from the first exhibit. As and when I need, I always scroll up to my word processor to refer and extract information that is of relevant. Well, once this is done, especially for questions 1, guys, you may want to start putting in some of the content into the report answer. Especially, you may want to start talking about the introductions of the report, whether with or without reading the first exhibit. You probably will notice the introductions is pretty much listing out the flow, the agenda, on all the requirements that you are supposed to respond. So you may want to start talking about the introductions in the report showing the flow of the coverage, like the report will first cover or assess, etc., followed by, etc., and finally, etc. So that is a very simple way to get started on getting something into your report content before diving down into technical element on dealing with each of the requirements. So guys, after putting up some templates into my word processor on the right-hand side, what do you notice now on the left? The left-hand side of the screen now is to show the second exhibit. Now, I know from the title of the second exhibit, that basically shows me and provide me a lot of detailed data, particularly numbers, which very likely it would have relating to at least the first requirement, which is part 1. If you glance through the rest of the requirement, that is not difficult for you to identify, guys. What else? What are the requirements that probably require numbers from this exhibit 2? So these will allow you to have the chance to apply the matching, the connecting job that we mentioned a moment ago. So when you glance through the detail of the second exhibit, you should also start asking in what way those numbers will be used in producing the answer relating to the requirement on part 1 at least, if not part 2 and 3. So these will allow you to start your connecting. However, when we start looking into the productions of the answer in the words processor, I would suggest you, when you are dealing with requirements such as part 1, asking for estimation, part 2 also an estimation, you may want to start considering adopting 2 ways of presenting your answer. Number 1, you may want to consider following what the model answer presented by showing the stated figure as part of a discussion, which is most likely appearing in the later part of the requirement. Secondly, you may want to consider producing and showing the answer in accordance with the flow of the requirement. Take for instance, when you are looking for part 1 and 2, that's asking for an estimation, you may just want to indicate clearly what exactly the figure that will look like. So you may take a look at part 1, 2, and 3. You may notice from the verb estimate, these require workings. Hence, you may want to start putting in some signposts showing the marking team. Hey guys, referring to my working 1, working 2, and working 3. In the spreadsheet, that is where my working will show how exactly these numbers are being derived. And then once I get the number, I will indicate right in the face of the report. So these will allow not only the marker to trace your final figure, more importantly, it allows you to pull up this number to form the body of a discussion, which is the main part of the discursive requirement at part 4 and onwards. So these will therefore show a very systematic way to create the framework of the answer. Some of us may ask, well, apart from showing the framework on the calculation, how about the narrative, the discursive nature of the question? You may take a look at part 4. As a demonstrations in the view of the absence of the time, only the part 4 are shown with the answer frame that I would suggest. First, spend some time, take a look at what exactly is the verb that found in part 4. The question is asking to discuss the acceptability of the cash and share-for-share offer for K company and S company shareholder. So you therefore have to talk about, well, if the offer is via cash, is it acceptable for both the party? So you may take a look at the way I present my answer. I will put in the signpost as mentioned a moment ago. Cash offer, is it acceptable to each of the shareholders group? If yes, why? If no, why? I will do the same thing for share exchange. Finally, as what the requirement also indicate the need to talk about assumption made in the estimation processes. So go back to the scenario, go back to the exhibit 2, pick up each and every assumption and put it as a subheading as you see down here. So if the assumption is pertaining to increased efficiency after the acquisition, you may want to share your thought. if this assumption is realistic and achievable. So you will start expanding into a paragraph based on this framework of the discursive nature of the questions. So guys, what do you notice? Whether the questions is on discursive or numerical requirement, there's always a way to put up a framework of an answer. So to me, putting a framework of an answer is a starting point to build your confidence, to get the ball rolling. Well, that will lead us to understand, by putting up the framework in the word processor, how about the Excel? How about the spreadsheet? Would there be a need to put up a framework? Oh, yes, definitely. If you remember what the questions in part 1 was asking, they were asking for PE ratio. Well, in my mind, I already would have learned the formula of PE ratio. I may want to start putting in the formula to start giving myself an indicator. I need to look out for information such as share prices, as well as the earnings per share or earnings in total. So these would directly navigate for clues that may be needed. At the same time, I'm sure everyone would be well familiar with the calculations of additional value created after the M&A. In other words, synergy. Based upon your knowledge learned, try to apply the presentation of working that you would have learned from any sources that you depend upon. Put it up in your spreadsheet. So therefore, in my presentation, you can see how I present the working for the synergy, especially looking at the cell M19. That is exactly where my synergies turn out to be. I will pull up the figure of M19 and show it into my word processor, and then I will pick it up to my discussions as we go on to the report writing. So guys, don't you think so? All these provide you a systematic way of putting up an answer framework in dealing with not only discursive nature, but also numerical requirements in any questions type in AFM. Well, after hearing some of the advice and tips on exam technique and habits, how about strategy, which are smart enough for you to take advantage to the maximum extent? Well, here are some of my advices for you. First and foremost, please get to know your examination. Now, first and foremost, I think you should be well aware the distribution, the allocations of the mark across the whole of the AFM exam paper is very much spread between requirements that are discursive in nature and numerical requirements in nature. And in terms of the discursive type of the requirements, I'm not sure whether you realize there are two broad types of discursive type of questions. First, questions that are pretty much generic, whereby there is very little need for you to dive down into exhibit looking for clue. Rather, most of the content in responding to these questions are mainly from books and learning materials that you would have got before the exam. Questions like putting up advantages, disadvantages of stuff, things like centralization, decentralization on treasury function, or advantages, disadvantages on different types of hedging techniques. Those are pretty much generic, isn't it? However, another type of discursive nature of the questions are much more application in nature, where you are asked to comment, discuss, assess, or examine the response of different stakeholders based on the result of the calculations that perform. Well, in terms of the numerical requirements or calculations questions, in other words, you may notice certain calculations questions are pretty much structured. Well, if the questions ask to calculate net present value, adjusted present value, or even to extent of calculating synergy, those are pretty much structured ones. However, they do have plenty of numerical requirements that are pretty much unstructured. Well, obviously, hedging techniques is definitely one of it. To some of the students, you may consider the calculations is pretty much structured if you already have a flow to deal with the workings. If not, you may consider the risk management questions on hedging are pretty much unstructured. But definitely another one that is pretty much unstructured is the questions on M&A, asking to assess the impact, the changes in the shareholders' wealth after the M&A. So these are the nature of the spread of the mark into different style of the exam questions. Guys, to deal with this kind of nature of exam paper, let me just advise you, when you want to form a smart strategy, please set your goal clearly. To me, it is pretty much simple. Your aim is to get at least 50 marks within the time allocated. And here is the game plan if you want to achieve this goal. Easy mark comes first, as mentioned again. Try to apply limiting factor mindset, meaning you should spend your time on those activities that allows you to scoop up most marks possible. So start working on something, spending your time on things that allow you to get most of the marks, which is the easy mark. And I will highlight to you in a moment what exactly it meant by those questions that allow you to scope up maximum possible marks with the shortest possible time. Then let's don't forget about the generic strategy as mentioned in terms of time management based upon the allocations of this timing for every marks on the questions. In other words, for a 50 marker questions, try not to spend more than 90 minutes into the questions itself. Okay, so that is exactly what we do. And again, spend about 45 minutes maximum on each of the 25 marks questions. Well, in terms of the sequence, it is a very commonly asked questions among many students. Which question should I start first? Well, many of the students would have started attempting the questions one, given the fact it carries most of the marks, isn't it? But to me, I may want to give it a second thought. Give it a try to attempt the questions once in the middle. Start with the section B questions. To get your ball rolling, you want to get started with the questions that is easy and quicker for you to get into the mode of producing the answer, for you to get your marks scope up within the shortest possible time. So that, having said so, is definitely not from a questions one. It definitely will start with the section B. And when you are already in a mode of producing your idea, you're in a mode of exam, that is when your stress is the least, right at the middle of the exam duration. So that is when I would suggest you to tackle the case study, section A. Let's not leave a case study to the end, because that will give you into the extreme level of the stress towards the end. So these are some of the sequence of attempt. Go back, give a try, rehearse 2 of these sequence. Let's find out which of these suit you the best. Well, in terms of discursive style of the requirement, as I mentioned a moment ago, do you notice that most professional skills marks in this paper are indeed connecting to discursive type of requirement? In other words, your written answer to a large extent will determine how many professional skills marks you are possibly able to earn. So therefore, never neglect your completeness and quality of discursive nature of answer. In terms of numerical style of the requirement, if you were to ask what exactly are the key techniques and the exam strategy, I would say own figure rules is the king. In other words, it is likely that students may have stuck and encountered some difficulty to complete or to get a correct figure. Guys, what I have to tell you is that don't give up. Even you come to the calculations that you're not too sure, just assign a figure in it and put the figure, continue to the next calculation, because mistake is only penalized once. That's called own figure rule. Remember, never just stop halfway and give up too easily in order to take advantage on own figure rule. After hearing some of the generic strategy, here are some of the smart advice for you in taking advantage of all the benefits like easy marks, like professional skills marks, like own figure rules. How are we to take advantage of those things? Well, here are some of the tips as a smart strategy. Between the 2 of these type of the questions, the one that allow you to scope up more marks within the shortest time span, guys, guess what? It's definitely the discursive nature of the questions not so much on the numerical questions. Many students tend to overly whelm by putting too much of time into dealing with calculation. At the end, it sacrifices the quality of the narrative answer. To me, that is not a wise move. A wise student should spend more time in dealing with and producing a quality type of discursive nature of the answer, because that will allow you to have more chance to earn not only technical but also professional skills marks. In terms of the two types of discursive nature of the questions, guys, guess what? Generic style of the questions is the one you never want to let go. That is something you can really scope up quite a bit of the easy mark. Well, as for numerical questions, take advantage and opportunity to focus on to dealing with those calculations that come with the structure. Well, if you were to ask me, I would give you a bit of advice. Guys, after this webinar, spend some time, ask yourself, is that possible to turn all the calculations part of the topic to become a structured calculation? And I can tell you this confidently, the answer is yes. It's the matter of, do you manage to find a pro forma or a portfolio that you can use it to present all the calculations in any topic within the AFM? If yes, well done to you guys, because you managed to turn all the numerical requirement into the structured style, and that is towards your advantage. Well, after hearing the exam technique and exam strategy, so let's not forget about talking on how are you going to manage, and not only manage, more importantly, how do you train up your time management skills? To me, the process of training up your time management skill will start from understanding what are the activities that will be involved in the process of producing your answer. Take a look at these three activities. Do you agree this is what you normally involve with in producing the answer? Hence, here is my advice for you to allocate your time. The first two activities should not be anything more than half of your time allocated in every question, so that you have at least half of your time in producing your answer. So guys, go back from now until the exam day. Go practice until you are able to perform these tasks based on this time allocation as mentioned. And of course, it is pointless to have an excellent time allocation plan without putting into practice. Therefore, the key factor to ensure you are able to practice this plan is your behavior. And make sure your behavior right from the beginning, now until the exam day, try to train up to be rational instead of emotional. In other words, when time is up, please stop. You should allocate your time. You should navigate your activity based on what it best for you, what it will serve most benefit to you, instead of going by what you would like to do, what you would love to do. That isn't the rational way of thinking and doing things. Guys, putting all these things together, you may be asking a question. Well, how am I to practice my time management skills based on what you have suggested, TK? Well, my suggestions for you guys is to aim to become somebody who is able to complete your task within the target time allocated. In order to achieve this kind of the status, my first stage of practice that I would suggest you strongly is try to practice to complete a task on the progressive and a piecemeal manner. In other words, pick up a section of the requirement in the questions. Take for instance, the questions is asking to compute and estimate net present value of the project. Make sure you practice on completing this requirement within the allocated time based on the marks given. Once you are able to do that, extend and expand your practices to complete questions, whether it is questions 1 or section B. But extend this ability to stick to the time with questions. When this is done, well, you are on the final stage on the time management planning by putting yourself into a 3 hour and 50 minutes duration and complete a full set of exam paper. I truly believe that time management can be trained. It's the matter of what is the methods that you should be using to train up your time management. And the answer is training by progressive, training by a piecemeal manner. It's something that you may want to worth considering. Well, guys, maybe before we take on some Q&A in the box, you may be asking, what is the bad thing I should do in the next 2 to 3 weeks' time before the judgment day? My suggestion to all is pretty much straightforward. Assuming we have 2 good weeks to go. Take a look at the first week. My advice for all the students on the first week is to make sure you are well equipped with all technical knowledge. Make sure all your technical knowledge are in a good order in your mindset. Arrange and tidy up, brush up your clarity, your understanding on all the technical knowledge in your mind. And to do so, the tools that could be useful in helping you to achieve the aim are the 5 items of the 2 listed. Study Hub, technical articles, topic explainer video, your tutor's learning material, and of course, your own podcast note. These are the 5 good tools that can allow you to achieve your aim in the first week. Coming to the final week, the final crucial weeks before the exam is get yourself into the exam ready mode. And this is the time for you to really focus on, guess what? Practice platform by attempting again from the most recently appeared exam questions and onwards. So this is for you to start demonstrating how to bring all your knowledge and all your techniques together and keep this temperature warm all the way until the judgment day. But of course, in order to have a tough mindset, both mentally and a tough body physically, don't forget the importance of keeping a strong mental health and physical health. Well, spending some time, guys, to go and make some friends and release your stress by talking to people, by spending your time, by staying alone, social time, me time, meditation is a good one for building up a strong and robust mental health. And let's not forget about go out and get some fresh air and some sunshine, and more importantly, get yourself sweat. So this is exactly what I would meant to have a well-balanced learning behavior and a well-balanced learning attitudes to achieve the chance of success in the AFM. So guys, these are all my sharings over here. It's time for me to take on some questions. I can see quite a number of questions are coming in over here. So here's the first questions I have from the floor. Now, how much points should be written in discursive type of questions? Let's say we have 6 marks. Let's assume there are 6 marks worth of the requirement in the questions. My advice for you guys, ask yourself, out of 6 marks, how many marks do you want? What is the target marks? I think it is a little less practical if you say, I would like to earn 6 out of 6. Obviously, if you can do that, wonderful. By all means, please go ahead. But to be more practical, I will always tell myself, I want to get at least a passing mark. In other words, 3 at least. But to play safe, maybe you want to go a little bit more as a buffer. So 3 to 4 out of 6 is your target mark. And how many points will you give? I would strongly recommend all the students to go with this mindset. 1 well-articulated, 1 fully developed point with headings, that should earn you 1 mark. Try not to estimate based on, I will be able to generate a point that worth 2 marks. You may be a little overly optimistic in that way. So try to be more realistic rather. Try to be more prudent rather. So if you want to earn and scope up 3 to 4 marks, especially the technical marks, you have to give about 3 to 4 points, guys. And let's not forget, if you put up your answer in a professional manner with the right tone, do you think you only earn 3 to 4 marks out of 6? The answer is no. You earn more than that because it comes alongside with professional skills marks, guys. So that is my suggestions for you. However, this tactic works based on the assumption every point you discuss, every point you bring up is of quality. How to make sure you bring up a quality point? Again, that depends on your quality of reading, your ability to pick up clue in the storyline from the exhibit, matching to the tasks that asked in the requirement, and articulate in the way that it really addresses the issue that were asked correctly. So all these things when put together will allow you to write a quality articulated point in the discursive nature of the questions. Here comes the second question. Professional skills marks depends on completion, on the complete questions. What do you think? Does it mean you will never get any professional skills marks if you are unable to complete all the requirements? The answer, no, it isn't true. The moment you start narrating a discursive nature of the questions, take for instance, if there are 4 discursive nature of the questions, in the whole of the questions, let's say 4, you manage only to attempt and complete 2. It doesn't mean you do not get any professional skills marks. You will get some of the professional skills mark, which usually it go in proportionate. In other words, if the professional skills marks on the section B questions is 5 marks, and you only attempt half of the requirement, what does it mean to you? Most likely, the maximum professional skills marks you get perhaps is about 2.5 out of 5 marks. So remember, the amount of the professional skills marks you get is somehow proportionate with the technical marks. So the more technical content you manage to complete, in other words, you were likely to get more of the professional skills marks. Okay? Well, here comes the next questions. When using own figure rule, should we mention separately the figure is assumed? Well, there's no need. There's no need for you to mention so. You just leave it there. The marker will automatically check the accuracy of your figure with the model answer. If your figure is not ties up to the model answer, the next thing the marker will check is your workings. If your working makes some sense and carry some mark possibly. Should no working is shown at all, but you are just dumbing in a dummy figure. At one glance, I think the marketing team would have known already this is an assumed figure. Hence, there isn't a need for students to specifically mention it is an assumed figure. Just put the figure there and move on, remember. Well, here comes the next questions. Pretty long one, so let me just read up to all. Now, commonly, when a currency futures or currency options result in an overhedge or underhedge, the answer would say the difference is not material. Well, it feels like a waste of time to calculate the under or overhedge at a forward rate if it is not necessary. Will we usually be able to assume that under or overhedge is immaterial? To me, you should only make this assumption by neglecting the need to show the result of under or overhedge amount hedged by forward rate if the question did not mention any instruction. Which, however, guys, if you try to take a look at some of the recent exam questions, it isn't the case. The questions usually will explicitly mention any under or overhedged resulting from the use of currency futures option may need to be hedged using forward market. So you better follow instruction. Unless nothing is mentioned in the question, yes, you may make such an assumption. Well, let's move on. We have the next questions. Is reading through the syllabus while understanding the concept sufficient to gain technical knowledge required? To me, by merely glancing through the syllabus is only allowing you to have an awareness to know the breadth of the coverage in the syllabus. Do you think the syllabus document is good enough to show the depth of the knowledge? I'm afraid not. However, syllabus is only of useful and fruitful for you to read through for students who are already thoroughly revising and preparing their technical knowledge. They just want to make sure, is there anything they left behind? Then only the syllabus will serve the purpose. Otherwise, do not expect using the syllabus as the shortcut to help you to screen through and prepare yourself on the technical knowledge. That isn't enough. If you ask me honestly speaking, on the fair side, there is no shortcut to buckle up your technical knowledge, particularly for AFM, the paper that contains such a vast volume of technical topic and aspect of the calculation. You have to really walk through every single calculation, get yourself understand the logic, the rationale behind the calculation and the formula. Now, one of the tips and advice for all is that never learn calculation by memorizing. Never learn calculation by just following the step without understanding the rationale and the logic behind the step. The more rigid your learning method is, the more likely